Right, good. Stop transcription. There we go. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session about faster claims payment. Thank you for joining us. We have joining us from Lloyds, we have Steve Hicks, and who's one of the transformation directors. Sorry, Steve, if I've got your title wrong, but essentially Steve is spearheading this from an executive level. We also have members of the FCP Faster Claims Payment team joining us. The purpose of this session is really a bit of a recap and introduction to the programme, but very, very brief. Really what we're after is your feedback, to give you our impression from the market about faster claims payment, to talk about how that is progressing as a programme, and to see how we can improve collectively the market's adoption of faster claims payment, which is a key part of the Blueprint 2 programme, and improving the market, making it better, faster, cheaper and more attractive for insureds to place their business in Lloyds and the Lloyds market. So we will be opening up the floor for a discussion. Hopefully we'll have some good discussion, because we've got some great people on the call, lively contributors, I know, and so that will take place a bit later. But essentially what I'd like to do is really kick off with introducing Steve Hicks. If we could perhaps lead with some of the high level side of this, and then move into the FCP team. Perhaps Ken, you could talk through that. I'd be really grateful. So Steve, handing over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Marek. So thanks everyone for joining. So I mean, look, if I cut to the chase, so we created the faster claims payments concept mainly to help DCAs get payments to customers, all about getting payments to customers quicker, in the kind of getting money to people in the way they want to be paid, to their bank account of choice and their currency of choice, and avoiding this these situations where we have cash calls in the market and money running out, and eventually through all of that starting to then free up some capital for managing agents. The adoption has been hampered by quite a number of different factors as we kind of work through the year. We're starting to now kind of solve some of those problems. I think one of the big challenges that remains, that probably is at the heart of this, is some system constraints around how we deal with broker to JV kind of interactions. So this kind of broker non-cash situation that kind of comes up, and Ken, I'm hoping that you can kind of help elaborate on some of that and where we are on some of the kind of tactical solutions that we're exploring. But I think the main reason I wanted to get this group together was I'm conscious that something needs to change to solve that problem. Either systems need to be upgraded to manage that situation, or we need to change something in the process centrally as a more fundamental change as part of the Blueprint 2 delivery. But at the moment, one of the big constraining factors we have is it being complex for brokers to process those kind of non-cash transactions through, and we know from conversations that we're having with broker firms that is preventing, as one of the things at the moment, preventing the adoption getting to where we need it to. So that was really why kind of this group wanted to kind of get folk together, and to understand a bit from your perspective of what do we think the right answer is there. Is there, are there some things that we're not aware of? And if you are thinking about changing things, to understand a bit about, well, what are the kind of plans for that looking like? The thing that's going to probably pivot the dial a bit for you all is we're about to write to the market and ask everyone to come up with what is everyone's plan to move towards FCP in earnest. We're expecting no new binders to be set up in 24 with legacy loss funds. So we're going to kind of start to turn up the dials on faster claims payments. And so I think the thing that will change when we put that letter out to managing agents in the next few weeks is I think that will stoke a lot more activity in the market. and that probably will result in people coming and having more conversations about, well, how do we get the technology to a place where it works, particularly back to this point, brokers coming and having conversations around, well, how are we going to solve this non-cash scenario, which is one of the areas where we've got a problem. So that's really the context from me. Ken, on this kind of particular, I mean, do you want to cover more broadly just some of the things we're doing to mitigate the challenges, and just cover a bit about the broker non-cash situation specifically, which I think is at the heart of today's discussion?
For sure. Yeah, okay. So yes, morning everyone. So my name's Ken Parriag. I'm the adoption lead for FCP and Blueprint 2 claims. So yeah, so my role and the team's role is to kind of work with the managing agents, DCAs, and obviously brokers to kind of get themselves up and running. So we are, I'd like to think, pretty much in the middle of what we're hearing from everyone. And yeah, as Steve's point, I think with any sort of change program, this is quite a big step change for the market. So it doesn't sort of like, nothing spins on a sixpence in the Lloyd's market, but definitely things are starting to happen now. So from a sign up perspective, we've got over 80% of the market by premium have signed up to FCP. So they are either starting their journey or getting ready to get going, or for some of the pilot users starting to think about how they're going to crank up their numbers. So that's a great sort of trajectory that we're starting to see now. Talking to the user groups, because there's an FCP steering group and there's an FCP market user group. So this is where we have broker reps with managing agents and DCAs talking about how this thing's going to work. This common theme around, look, this broker non-cash process, which again is different for some brokers. For some brokers, their systems do actually have a feature to cope with non-cash processing, because the idea with FCP is the payment's being made. So you're not relying for these cash call processes anymore. So the payment's made, and Vitesse are actually facilitating the actual transaction from the managing agent's funds into the funding account, which the DCA's got access to via a payment account. So as far as the broker's concerned, their processing turns to just transactional sort of messaging processes, hence the non-cash bordereau that goes through. So we don't need the brokers to collect any money anymore to be part of this process. They're just literally just facilitating the bordereau, going to the market to create USMs and SCMs for the managing agents. And that's where we're hearing this, you know, as I say, some brokers have got their systems geared up and they're fine. Other brokers are saying, yeah, we can do some manual stuff. And other brokers are saying this is going to cause us lots of headaches because we've got automated processes and this is going to be a real problem. So for us, as we're at the start of this journey, we're just trying to get ahead of that issue so that we can start getting in a position as managing agents want to scale up. Obviously, we've got to have the brokers in the space where they're comfortable and able to go with them. Hence, to Steve's point, why this has come up as a theme. So for us, I think, Marek, you've really done a little bit of pre-work on this, isn't it? By talking to some of the suppliers to work out who can do what as far as manual versus it's actually in the system, as in, or actually it doesn't actually work. So yeah, so for us, it was more just, as Steve said, it's a great opportunity to hear from your side what you're hearing from your market user groups. I'm guessing you have user groups and steer codes on your systems. If you're kind of hearing anything or any sort of mood music that the brokers are thinking this thing's coming now, we need to get ready for this non-cash processing, which I'm guessing, Steve, with future state could even become more of a thing, because I guess direct settlement isn't going to be this once in a blue moon type thing going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. There are various iterations of how things are going to evolve as Blueprint 2 lands. I think for now, I think let's just focus on this problem. But you're right. I think there will be an evolution of how money is moved around the market as we embed some of the Blueprint 2 capabilities and then iterate on it further.
Yeah.
But this is a capability that is there, that exists today, and that we want people to start using as soon as possible. We need to make sure that we've got the right ecosystem for it to work.
Okay, can I pick it up there in terms of, Ken, what you're talking about, some of the conversations we've been having? Yeah. Of the 10 providers I've identified that provide systems to brokers, and this is sort of, I'm not giving away any trade secrets here, but half of those providers have a capability to for integrated submission of cash, and then 3 out of those providers have got a capability that is totally integrated for purposes of FCP and non-cash payments. So that should hopefully give everyone in this audience, or everyone in this discussion, a view of capability in the market and what people have in terms of choice. I think where I would come from if I was a supplier, which of course, I'm obviously not, but if I was a supplier, I'd be looking at, well, what's my client asking me for? And, because I'm ready to move when my client's ready to move. On that subject, as Steve said, there's going to be an impetus from Lloyds out to the market, which is, to tell us managing agents what your plans are around improving your claims processing. The feedback I'm getting from my engagement partner broker colleagues is that some of the hesitation in the broking community has been around, how do I automate or put in place better automation for managing the volume of transactions that's going to happen as a result of working with non-cash payments. And I think what's also going to be driving that is, from another dimension, the work that Ken and his team have been doing in terms of signing up the managing agents, getting the agreements in place, and getting the binders, the non-cash binders in place, which there has been recently quite an uptick in terms of getting that number of non-cash cash binders into this process. Of course, as you rightly point out, Ken, Steve, it's then about the brokers actually engaging with this and improving their processes, automating them. So I think there's a twofold side to this conversation. One which is, as soon as providers, you'll move when the client asks you to move. But there's also an opportunity, I think, which is to do some R&D here and potentially propose what it might take to get a solution in place. And you're going to want to do that off the back of market demand. So this isn't meant to be a commercial discussion, but it's just sort of to open up that discussion about what your views are and what you're hearing from the market. So that's kind of it. We're not driving anyone to do anything, but how could we work together, as Steve says, to make this reality, I think, to everyone's benefit. So that's kind of the perspective.
One sort of last comment, and apologies, this will sound like a sales pitch, but that's kind of what I do every day. There are some upsides for brokers. From a broker perspective, you're not involved in setting up the loss funds, you're not involved in the cash calls, you're not involved in the queries, you're not involved in moving money anymore. So, and we do go through that with the brokers. So I think a lot of the brokers see the benefits, but it's more, as Marek said, it's the mechanics now of how's it's going to work, and as the volumes scale up. So I think some of the brokers are saying to us, look, we can cope with a few. It's this obviously future sight of how's it going to be when it starts cranking up and we're getting more traction on this FCP volume. So that's definitely the messaging we've been sharing with the brokers. And like I said, my guess is this is going to come up more as we start scaling up the volumes. And this is really just, it'd be great to get ahead of this issue and see where you guys are at. So yeah, I'm really interested for what you've been hearing.
So if we could open the floor for discussion, and as I know how this always works, not everyone leaps in with questions, but if you want to switch your camera and ask a question, that's great. But to kick it off, perhaps Ken, could I ask you, would you have any sort of, what was the most recent stats in terms of binders that are now signed up, or managing agents and binders that are signed up to the program, just to give people an idea of the scale?
Sure.
If that's at all possible.
Yeah. So like I said, we've got 32. So out of the 54 in the market of managing agents who write binders, 32 of those have now signed their market user agreement, so their MUA, which means they're basically started the logistics and the contractual stuff's done. It's now about us talking to their implementation teams and change teams about picking binders to go onto the system and starting that journey. So that's happening. Of the 32, 11 of those managing agents have actually got binders on the system. And again, this ranges from a few managing agents who have just done the 1 or 2 just to kind of get the process going, just to see how it works. to other managing agents like your Brits and that are, you know, doing a higher volume of binders and are kind of really invested in processes and back office arrangements to kind of gear up. So that's coming. And at the moment, I think we're nearly at 100 binders on the system. So, and again, those binders, once they go on the system, every bordereau will then be going through as a non-cash. So that was, and obviously for the length of that binder, that's how many transactions will be needed. And as Steve said, though, we're hoping the market's going to, we're sharing data with managing agents to kind of encourage them to get up and running. And certainly we're hoping for the second half of the year, with the cat season coming for 1/1s, we're hoping there's going to be more going into this space. So that's where we're starting to see these, you know, I think green shoots of traction. We're really going to try and get behind and accelerate now.
Right, thanks. Rich, if you want to, okay, hold on, where are we now? We've got, Richard popped something in the chat here. Do the London market inclusions to EBOT 2016-10 accommodate a way to indicate non-cash settlement for brokers? That's the first question. I don't know is the answer to that. I'll have to find that one out, Rich. It's a very good question. Second question, can we get a view on the current capabilities or planned roadmap items of Vitesse in terms of the area of data extracts? For example, bordereau extraction via CSV API, whether it's aligned to market standards? Good question, Ken, probably one for your team. And three, is there any update on the integration of binder details between DCOM and Vitesse? That's a good one. I think, you know, in terms of how the market's working with DCOM now. Oh, you're on the. Yeah.
I could do 2 and 3.
On mute, Ken.
I have my back now. I could do 2 and 3. Steve, are you able to comment on 1 for EBOT standards?
No. I don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping that someone on the call might have a clever answer on is there a way that we can do something around that. I can certainly go and investigate. The challenge with that is I think we're a long way away from brokers moving to EBOT at scale. So in the intervening period, what do we do if that was an option? Do we just end up with it's still the same problem, right? Of systems today can't process. The constraining factor is broker systems today, for many, 80% of the market can't process a non-cash transaction. So let's say there was a thing in EBOT, you still have to build the thing in EBOT to do that. Unless it's there, I doubt for many people's versions of the systems they're using, it's necessarily there. So the challenge we need to get over is what do we do for the 80% of people that can't process non-cash? Do we just leave that and then basically we get stuck on volumes will always be limited because there'll be manual intervention that's required? So maybe we pause on that question to the system vendors around the market. You'll know your systems that don't work. Like, you know, what's your thoughts on that?
Who can I pick on? If I look in the, I don't want to pick on anyone, but I'm sure there's some we've already had some conversations.
Steve's a friendly, isn't he? A lot of Steve's systems don't. I know Steve, but I don't know if Steve's. Do we have Mr. Reed? Oh, we have Steve in the room. Excellent. Okay. Steve, some of your systems in your stable don't support this, do they? I think Global XB is one of the ones that comes up. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think, I guess the comment I was going to make was, as yet, we've only had one broker come to us with interest in this, and only interest, and not particularly interest in paying for development in the system. But you know, we put the commercials to one side. I think we're at a stage now where it sounds like the carriers are more interested and they're starting to sign up, and this is starting to move. They need to be talking to their brokers about getting them involved, and perhaps that's been going on, which is good, but it's not coming through to us yet. So I think we can proactively talk to the user groups So we can take it as an agenda item, and we can say, look, you know, there is this is starting to get some traction. I agree, we don't want to necessarily wait for the eBot digital world. If this is something that can deliver benefit now, then why wouldn't we enable it? So I think there's a conversation to be had. Again, we won't get into commercials, but a conversation to be had between us as a vendor and our customer base. But there needs to be pull from the customers. That, you know, with so many times in the past, we've developed things that haven't been taken up. So we need that pull and that interest, and then we can work things through.
So, Steve, can I just ask you a question?
Yeah, go on, Paul. I may not answer it.
Because they would be able to process the entry on the system, but they may not be able to send automatically the class message through the system, they could log on to the class portal and submit it through there. Now, if the volumes are low, then it's a workaround, but could be used as an interim to get the volumes going. And that could be not just on your systems, but any system that doesn't support it. That is a viable workaround in the short term with relatively low volumes. As the volumes increase, I'm sure your customers will come to you and say, can you build the automation into the product, because we've now got the volumes increasing whereby we don't want to do them manually through class. Isn't that a viable workaround for customers to do in the interim just to get this up and running?
So Paul, I mean, they are doing workarounds at the moment. So there's two. So kind of what you're describing is that is effectively what's being looked at to be stood up inside the JV. So we're looking at, is there a way that we can create a BPO-driven process to do that on behalf of brokers that people pay for? What you described is something that brokers could do themselves. The other way that people are doing it is effectively they're kind of processing a cash transaction, I think, and then they back it out and kind of do a negative, and then they do another one. So there are some workarounds that are in play, and we're going to hopefully add this one potentially in the JV to allow people to kind of have a paid for one that they at relatively low cost that they can kind of use. But all of that is hampered by you know, a volume, that there's a volume limit on that. And I think while it's, you know, people at the moment have been in the stage where they've been experimenting with this capability, I think it's fine. I think it probably sees us through to the end of this year. But I think beyond that, if we start to get to the numbers where we want this to grow, and we want to get to, well, actually, you know, ideally we'd like in 24 to be seeing most of the book using FCP by the end of 24, you start to get very quickly to a place where those workarounds become quite expensive for broker organizations to run. Or if it's a central service, it would, in the JV, it would need to be quite a big service. You need quite a lot of people, because there are a lot of border road transactions, as you know, that come through. So if all of those start to go manual, that's from you also start to kind of, to some extent, start to go backwards. You go from a place where we are today, where we're in quite a good place in terms of how things operate. You almost start to go back in time to when things were the way things were done, I don't know, however long, 5 years, 10 years ago, before we kind of tightened up on the way some of these things are processed. So I think the heart of this conversation is I think what you mentioned, Steve, is the problem, which is, I think we're not seeing many people ask for it. We are seeing some conversations happen. We know that some manual things can be done, but they're volume limited. The solutions range from getting people to use eBot to doing a manual, that might be an option, or doing something manual, something automated that avoids this manual process around bordereau submission. But the question for me is, what can we do to move that conversation along and get something into roadmaps? One action is we need to get the customer demand right. So there's almost a conversation that needs to be had with Libre, which is, can you galvanize people together here and get them to ask the question? That sounds like an important action to get this onto the roadmap, and we'll take that away as a piece to do. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about?
I think there's I mean, it starts for me at source, which is generate demand. Once there's demand, then people can produce solutions. I think what I've heard that's changed over the last sort of 6 months is really the uptick in people getting on board this. We know the London market doesn't typically change overnight in anything, and where you've got systems that do run today, albeit maybe costly processes, then people are resistant to change. However, I think the message I got from the couple of CIOs I've spoken about was really they are looking for a strategic solution for this in terms of automation. There are tactical ways around this, and Paul, you've identified another one, and it's just great, and people have adopted those already. But if you're looking at taking this on board wholesale, then they're looking for strategic solutions. So I think there's a supply and demand aspect to the equation, whereby you're looking for demand. So Steve's outlined a way that Lloyds is going to put some pressure on the market to increase that demand. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity there. Sorry, Paul, you've got a question. You've got your hand up. How can we? What's your point?
Yeah, hi. I have probably a couple of comments. Firstly, very specifically about Global XP, it does have a non-cash function, but it doesn't produce a class message. So that's, I guess, the key issue there. I mean, previously, why would we produce a class message for such a thing? So, I put together a solution estimate for our customers. It was written for one of our the customer that raised it, who were part of the FCP original group of brokers and carriers. It's been raised a number of times at our quarterly customer user engagement groups and has received nothing but deafening silence. So it would sort of feel to me, to your point about generating demand, does that mean that brokers aren't seeing enough of a cost benefit case to want to pay for the solution that I've outlined, which in the big scheme of things ain't really a lot of money? We know brokers aren't particularly keen opening their wallets for much of anything, but that's the thing that I find surprising almost, really, is the apparent lack of interest, certainly from our customer base. And as you know, we've got brokers both large and small and in between. And yeah, it's just been strangely quiet about FCP, about their willingness to want to pay for the relatively straightforward enhancement that I've described, particularly for Global XP.
And I think it sounds like there are benefits, because Ken, you reeled off a few for brokers. I don't know how well they're understood by the broker community. So I think it is all about that. It's all about demand. It's all about understanding the benefits and the things that brokers will avoid having, won't have to do in the process going forward if they adopt this.
Yeah. Well, maybe to your point, Paul, I think, and certainly speaking to some of the bigger brokers, who are literally saying to us, well, we'll engage when our market are saying they're going to use the system. So, and we are stressing to the managing agents, you've got to lead this process. The brokers can help you facilitate, but you've got to sign up, you've got to pick the binders, you've got to want to do it. So that's what we're spending a big slug of our time as a team. We've kind of divided and conquered. So we've got a few of us are really focusing on the managing agents. So Regan, myself, Bev, we're out there talking to all the managing agents. We've got a couple of people on our team spending time with the brokers. So maybe, Paul, to your point, some of the brokers, I suppose, not unreasonably, are thinking, well, until it becomes a burning platform, why am I prioritising it over other things? I think what we're saying, though, to Marek and Steve's point earlier, is that we're starting to get a sense, and I hope I don't get to eat my words, but the market seems to want to get engaged now. And I think, there's going to be some expectations coming from Lloyds, but hopefully talking to people, they're seeing the benefits, and I think they are seeing the good reasons why this thing's a good thing to do. And we'll hopefully start. And I think for us, it's kind of really getting ahead of that, because the last thing we want to do is get the managing agents in a good space. And then we're finding the brokers that aren't able to support that because their systems aren't geared up. So I think this is why I think we're trying to be a bit preemptive here, isn't it, really, guys? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, Steve's comment that the comms to the market will really say, for 2024, we expect no binders to be set up without them being fully FCP capable and set up that way. So no more loss funds at all. So that, will be driving demand, obviously just for new binders, but I say just, there's still a significant volume of business that we put through there. So I think there's an opportunity. I'm not trying to, say you should all go away and start your R&D and do that investment, but I think, that there could be some merit in looking at your systems and really mapping out what would that cost, what would it take for us to change our system, and where would that take us? How long would that take us? And that's in amongst all the other things that the market is going to be asking you to do between now and this time next year. So there's a lot going on. But if this is something we could get out there, that would be great. And from your perspectives, guys, what other perhaps challenges do you find that you're facing, or maybe is it a systems thing? Is it a systems integration thing? And Paul, you talked about class messages. Obviously, these are going to change with the new systems being brought on stream. Is there something around there from a technical perspective that we could help you with? That maybe Rich, you brought up the ECOTS changes. Is there some more clarity that would help you there? Is there something else maybe from an architectural perspective, a messaging perspective we could help you with?
In short, from my perspective, Marek, the short answer is no. There's only one small change we have to make to the way we generate a class message to support FCP, as I understand it. We've laid out the changes that we need to make to XB to do a relatively simple set of enhancements that will enable FCP to work and make it as automated as we can without going into some huge new integration with decom or whatever else that we don't do now, but to meet the fundamental requirements that our customer defined, it's not a particularly big thing to do.
Right.
And need them to agree to pay for it. That's the bottom line.
Well, no, I totally get that. And I suppose the other aspect that has been flagged internally is each vendor has a different deployment situation in the market. Not everyone has a in the cloud multi-tenanted system. We have an awful lot, if not the vast and overwhelming majority of systems that are either on-premise or hosted, with separate instances. So just the whole upgrade process. So there's questions about what that upgrade process, would it be a patch, would it be a minor enhancement, would it be people would have to catch up with multiple versions before they'd be able to get a patch that would be effective for this solution. So there were lots of questions and considerations, I think, that need to be taken into account in this. But as a general principle, I think that's really what we're trying to understand. And as you say, Paul, in your case, and I'm sure in some others, a small change might be all that's required, but there's still complications around that.
But it is a release. You're right. It's a new release of the software. As when you start looking at Blueprint 2, ultimately to manage the changes necessary, yes, you end up requiring a new release of the code, and therefore the customers are going to take that on, and we know how much of a pain that process is for any customer to take an upgrade of their software, and particularly for some customers who've been on some ancient version for the last God knows how many years. As you rightly say, taking on a new version of software means you are leaping years worth of versions sometimes, and that has all sorts of impact to the operational issues of taking on the software. Rather than, from our point of view, it's just releasing the software to that customer. But for that customer, taking a new version of our software is in and of itself a challenge operationally.
So
I wish customers would keep up to date, but they don't. What can I say?
Sorry, Paul, but no, Thank you. Yeah, that I think it's really important to hear those things because they are material to the conversation. So thinking sideways, you know, and this isn't meant to create a solution now, and that's not the point of this, but just to raise it as an idea. Is there something on the side that could be created that would work alongside the system? You know, just trying to think creatively around the objective here, achieving the objective. Don't know, I'll leave that with you as a thought for everyone. But in terms of more issues that people are facing, perhaps if we've got some views from elsewhere across the market. Kevin, you're sitting there with a deep history of working with the smaller brokers, I know, and great experience, especially in the financial space. I wondered if there was something that you might have some thoughts, maybe, even if you hadn't had the conversations with the clients, but what your thoughts might be around this. Oh, and you're on mute, unfortunately, with the microphone up in the air.
Yeah, story of my life. We haven't had loads of conversations with our clients on this. Yeah, we don't have loads and loads of people doing claims on our system, but those that do have quite a few binders. But we can already produce a non-cash transaction, if you like. What I'm not sure of is if it actually shows up on the border we produce or not, so I need to check. But fundamentally, I don't see that as being a big issue. You know, I think most of the brokers that we have use a lot of third-party adjusters, things like that, for their claims, and they'd probably welcome the opportunity of having less loss fund management, less loss fund top-ups, that sort of thing. So I think similar to what Paul Fussell was saying there, that the changes would be immense. We just haven't had that much interest so far. We've given it a little bit of consideration. We're in the early stages, really, of thinking how we might meet that requirement.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin, for that. I'm just going to start picking on people now because it's Friday and why not? I could see.
Marek, is it worth maybe if we give the guys a couple of minutes to get their thoughts? I'm just conscious Richard raised those other questions. I can just quickly cover those off while we and you can pick
sure.
you might want to go, give people a chance to think. On the second point around the API, because FCP is really the payment process, it's not a case management system, so it's not got the claims reserves, it's not got movements. So at this stage it's not producing the claims bordereau, but we are really recommending to DCAs that they really think about an API, because there is an API that people can hook into with FTES as far as the CMS going to the API system for payments, and that will hopefully avoid all the fat finger problems. So that's something we're out there and talking to the FTES guys. That exists today. They've got all the infrastructure to support that. It's a couple of days effort, and we would like to see that happen. So that's something that, but that's not going to replace the bordereau at this stage, and it certainly wouldn't be something that would go to the broker to send in. So that's more between the DCA and FTES. As far as the market standards, though, obviously we're making sure whenever we capture in FTES, years of accounts, UMRs, all the key reference data that you need, that's there, because this all goes to the reconciliation process that the managing agents need. So yeah, core data that people need has been factored into the solution for sure. But again, it's not trying to create the V5 bordereau out of FTES, because obviously that's all your claims reserve stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the integration, between DCOM and FTES. So that's there. That functionality went in last year. We're kind of parallel running that. Well, I say we, FTES are parallel running it. So what they're doing, they're getting information from the brokers just to make sure how that stacks up against the DCOM data extract that, again, they've got an API with. I think it's been a bit 50-50 on the accuracy. So again, before we can rely 100% on DCOM, we really need to kick the tires on that, because if, I don't need to tell you guys, if you imagine if you set your payment accounts up based on incorrect data and you've got lines and orders and policies and UMRs wrong, you're in a world of hurt to have to unpick that because you've made payments to people. And so you've got to get that stuff right. So again, the functionality is there, and I'd say I think it's more being road tested, and then we're just sort of like seeing how that process works before we cut over to just decom. But that process, say that went in last year. So Richard, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Ken. Well, let me put my camera on so everyone can see me. It is a Friday, as Marek said anyway. Yeah, why those are important, I think, it speaks to some of the problems around possibly adoption in areas of this requiring rekeying, and the scope of the contract as well. We're talking about, I think, still singleton. Are we capable of handling more subscription-based grinders now?
Yeah, this is the urban myths that fly around this market. So what we have said to people is you might want to pick a singleton to start because it's just you, but 1000% subscription risks works in FCP. So we did that pilot that was tested on subscription. So 1000% it works. What we have said to people is to pick a singleton to start because it's just you and it's just your finance team and it's all 100% you. So that's where we've said start your journey with the singleton, but 100% you can do subscriptions as well. And all classes of business.
The only caveat is you need the other MAs need to be signed up.
Yeah, which is everybody's got to be in. Yeah, that's the thing with FCP. It's an all-in. So in today's world, traditional for test, you can just be the leader only. But no, in FCP, everyone's got to be in. But once you're in, that mechanics and the process is the same then, and you just reuse that funding account arrangement. So yeah, it's a good point, Richard. And this is where we try to really double down on our messaging, and every presentation we go to, we stress the scope and we stress you can go back to as many years of account as you like. So talking to some of the runoff companies, you know, you're not limited to just new years, you can go back to old years. So we've really tried to be as clear as we can, but this is the trouble, like you just picked up on. People may have heard that message last year, and that does permeate out. So we do keep reinforcing, and when we go to speak to the manager and agents, which we're doing as we speak, we're kind of reinforcing what you can do. So yeah, so it's more about start that journey. And this is where, again, we've also said to them, we give them a list of the brokers that we've spoken to so they know who we've engaged with. We've got the DCAs that we've been talking to. So again, it's getting that sort of sweet spot where you've got a broker that's geared up and the DCA that's geared up with all the managing agents to get going. And then hopefully then that's where once they've done it a few times and actually it's not as scary as they thought and actually it's not as bad as they were hearing because they've done it for themselves, we're hoping that volume is going to start hockey sticking up. So where it's doing that, we want it to do that.
Yeah, it's almost a problem that solves itself by market effects. The more people come on,
and we have had sort of comment, well, you know, we'll let the big boys go first, and we'll let someone else deal with the teething problems, and we'll let some, you know, and there's always that. But it's like, guys, to Steve's point, you can't let someone else go first. You've got to be involved. So hence why we're doing our best to get everybody, and we are stressing to people, if you don't get geared up, you're stopping everyone else from actually using this the benefits of this platform. So there is a bit of peer pressure now to say, look, guys, as a market, you have to be collectively moving forward. You can't just, you know, let other people spearhead this and then catch up in a year or two. You've got to get going now. And that's some of the messaging we are getting to managing. And we're actually going out to every single managing agent and we're having a one-to-one with every MA with all their data to say, guys, you've got all these millions of pounds tied up. You've got a solution that will give you that money back. Why wouldn't you want to use this? And if you have got concerns, talk to us. We're here to help. Which is why, like I said, we do not want to do all this work and then find the brokers turn around and say, well, yeah, you know, but we can do about 12. That would not be a good response.
Yeah, no, understood. Almost like building a community of carriers to put the pressure on the brokers collectively might be a good adoption path.
But I think you're going to get the key MAs are going to get going, and we want to make sure the brokers that they work with are comfortable and, you know, can support them, because it is you cannot do this independently. You have the DCAs teed up, the brokers have got to be there, but the broker life should get easier if they've got mechanics. And it's great, Kevin, if you've got your system does it, cooking with gas, you know, if you we just need to get behind that because it has been a bit of a thing.
Thanks,
Ken. Can I ask? Sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay. So is it only brokers who are material to this, or could there be other participants like the DCAs who could also be contributing in this respect, or is it the brokers who have to pull the trigger and then everything else flows?
I think as far as the border road non-cash processing, Marek, it's just the broker that does that. I mean, it's an input from the DCA. The broker's got to do their thing because it's got to go through their systems to get the messaging to whether in the future ICOS and New World, we could change it, but again, as Steve said, all right, no.
No.
No,
Well,
that-
no,
pipe dream, Steve.
The DA landscape in Blueprint 2 at kind of the initial point next year is not going to be that different from where we are today. I think it might open up. I think we need to. I take the action on going to look at the Accord route, where that opens a different way of solving it. But that still means that there's a change that needs to go into a broker system to solve it. There is not going to be a.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There's a Nirvana DA world where you don't do bordereau, and that to some extent takes the problem away. But that would require other system builds in broker systems to not have bordereau. So you know I'd almost park that visionary concept for now. There is some changes that are going to need to be made, whether that was if there's something you can do through Accord, or whether there's something else that you can do. Like the fact is, some changes need to be made to support this process. That is a fact. And the key thing I take from this conversation is we need to get the managing agents, when they start doing their planning, to engage with, off the back of this letter that we're going to send out, to engage with the broker community, because only if we do it as a joined up thing are all the bits of the puzzle going to come together. So that if they get that demand to you guys, it sounds like the changes aren't that necessarily that hard, but they need to be having the conversation with you.
I think technically they're not hard, Steve, but as Paul, reinforces, rightly reinforces, the whole change management process and the scale of change potentially for the brokers in terms of operations should also be considered, because it can involve quite extensive testing programs from the business. But if the demand is there, if the value is there, if people are seeing that, look, we can, as Ken, you pointed out, save costs in other areas, and a short-term hit in one area results in a long-term saving in others, then I think that this is that's a value-based conversation to be had. And I think it's really important for this community to particularly to understand that this has been the start, that we've got some people spearheading this, but 2024 is when it's all going to kick off in terms of people really being encouraged to make their binders all FCP enabled. So, or rather not enabled, but FCP only, and no loss funds. So this is important that we start to think about this right now, I think.
I think just to add as well, I think there's a timing point. So back to Mr. Fussell's comments around the change impact. There are other changes, obviously, that Blueprint 2 is going to require brokers to perhaps upgrade their systems. This may not be a comment that applies to every system out there, but certainly if there's changes that we need to make that do result in a new version, brokers will be thinking, okay, so when do I upgrade? I've got to be ready for phase 1 digital services. That's mandatory. So if I need an upgrade for that, when's that going to be? If I want to go with digital phase 2, when do I upgrade for that? So how many upgrades am I going to do over the course of the next 2 or 3 quarters? Because there's an impact on each of them. So there might be just a timing consideration. You might have all the demand in the world, and then brokers will still say, yeah, actually, I'm going to leave it until the end of Q1 next year before I upgrade.
Yeah.
Unless there's pressure that says actually you'll be unable to comply with a new mandate around FCP in the binders by from 1/1 inceptions. That puts a different spin on it.
I think that's a fair point, Steve. I suppose if I was then to put my wishing hat on, what about rolling different functionality into those releases? So if it, for example, and sorry, Paul, to perhaps take your words out of context, if it is a small change, then that could be rolled in at the same time, all the pain at one go. Is that totally out of the question? Again, I'm not looking for answers right now, because every single supplier will have those different situations with their clients. But I'm just wondering, is that an option that we could put there? Perhaps this is about putting those this topic more readily into the conversation. I don't know. And I have sat, as you know, Steve, and everyone, I've sat on your side having those conversations. I know they can be a challenge sometime, but that's where actually Ken and his team are there ready to support you. and they're very happy to come into any client conversation, respecting confidentiality, and put the case for FCP that supports you and that conversation. So don't feel as though you're on your own in this. Very much, we've got a team of people very much accustomed to talking to to all the market participants who can support you in that conversation, and not just can, but they are really willing to, and to put the case very strongly to those brokers.
Well, I think, to be fair, Marek, I'd like to hope, guys, that there shouldn't be any brokers that don't know about FCP, for sure, because we have done our best to get around to the market. I think it's, to Paul Fussell's point, maybe it's the demand challenge, where if the MAs aren't stepping up and using it, then, as you said, why would the brokers want to make it a priority? But I would like to hope second half of the year you're going to see that being a little bit of a step change now, and people wanting to get behind this and wanting to get ready, which is why I think it's good the more prepared you, because there shouldn't be any brokers out there who don't know about FCP. I'd be really disappointed if you crash into someone who says, what's FCP? If you did, let us know, and then we can follow up. But I think by talking to Jackie and Lieber, we've been to lots of facilities forums and the DACGs and the cold meetings and stuff. There's a lot of reps, a lot of the brokers that we've spoken to. But yeah.
Hot off the press, we have got 5 minutes left on this, but hot off the press while we're on the call. So Rich, to your question, do the London market inclusions to the EBOC 2016-10 standard accommodate a way to indicate non-cash settlements or pre-settled or already settled status? I'm just reading for brokers, please. The answer is yes, it's already part of the 2016-10 standard, and that's come from Accord just now. So it's in there. I'm afraid that just means you've got more homework potentially, but I think, it's these sort of clarifications, that are important for people to understand. And I think that's perhaps a lesson for us to take away in the terms of the Blueprint 2 team about, clarifying it, thinking of every single point we can to clarify to people so that there are no questions left, as far as the technicalities of this are concerned.
Even if that is true though, Marek, I don't think that just means you might solve the problem in a different way. But unless anyone thinks differently, I still think there's work to be done in all of the system vendors to make something work, whether it's using those rails or sending a message into class in the kind of legacy route. I think the key thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is we need to get the right broker momentum behind this, and maybe we've been focusing too much on just engaging the managing agents around it, and we need to do more to engage the brokers on it and to get them to add the demand, because whether it's the Accord route or whatever else, someone needs to, or people en masse need to ask for this capability if it's going to arrive any time in the next 12 months.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think I wonder if we're just about at time now, so I'll just ask: are there any other questions or points people would like to raise before we wrap up for today?
Thanks for organising this, Marek. It's been helpful.
Oh, well, thank you to everyone who's taken part. You've all stepped up, and very good to see that you've all actually spread the invite out to a lot more people than were invited. So that's really good. That shows this is an important topic. I think we're all mindful of the fact that we can't switch this on overnight because of practicalities. But I think if we're more confident that there is not just a sort of latent demand, there is very much a proactive approach from Lloyd's and from the market to this opportunity, really, as it will be for yourselves, then I think that should hopefully leave a sort of sense of comfort that this is a reasonable and a viable route to progress and to look to go on with. Now, as I said, Ken and his team are available. If you want to contact me or Ken directly, we can sort out those appointments and get people involved in those conversations, and we'd be very, very happy to do that. Also from a technology point of view, you know, like Rich, your question there, and if anyone else has got any questions about anything else to do with class or any messaging like that, please, you know, get in touch. You always know you can with me, and we'll sort that out as well. And if there are any particular issues with particular clients, then we can try and, you know, help those as well. We've got very good connections in. So yeah, we want to make this work. And thank you very much, everyone, for participating then. In which case I'll say have a great weekend, and yeah, see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah.
See you later. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.